Walter. This was the summer you spent at the river. The summer of your first beer, first job, first love. The summer of '83. The summer of Joey. You met him at Gino's Fabulous Pizza at the end of your junior year of high school. Gino's was a fixture in the Gonzaga neighborhood. Checkered tablecloths, candles and Chianti bottles, oregano red sauce splattered on overcooked pasta. All the Catholic families in Spokane went there, yours included. The kids for pizza and spumoni, the parents for rigatoni and chilled lambrusco. One night your family was having dinner and the owner asked if you needed a summer job, and the next thing you knew, you were bussing tables. You were fast and you could carry 3 glasses in each hand. You felt like an adult. Then, in July, one of the waitresses broke her wrist and you got promoted. And immediately, Joey began flirting with you through the kitchen pass-through window, as if when you were a busser you had been too young to notice, but as a waitress, you were fair game. You could feel his eyes on you every time you spun a ticket on the order wheel. Lasagna, spaghetti with tips, mushroom and sausage pizza. Got it, Jeans, he'd say. The owner, Shirley, had recently allowed waitresses to dress more casually instead of buying uniforms from the food service catalog. So while the older women wore their old poly pants and hip-pocket shirts, you got to wear jeans. Order up, Jeans, Joey would say, sliding a lasagna through the window. He worked the pizza oven on Friday and Saturday nights and baked comically large lasagnas whose recipe he claimed was noodle sauce cheese, lather, rinse, repeat. You thought this was hilarious. But then everything Joey did and said that summer was hilarious. It felt like flirting, but you knew it could be teasing, and after all, he was at least 4 years older than you, an upperclassman at Gonzaga University, and what college senior wants to date a high school kid? And then one day you were counting tips and you felt someone over your shoulder. It smelled like shaving cream. You turned and Joey smiled. Hey, Jeans, he said. I don't suppose I could get the phone number of that ass. Okay then. It was to be love. That night he pulled you into the walk-in and kissed you. Joey was 22. He had a grown man's body, a series of squares all the way up to his block of brown hair. His eyes were green and arched, with a quality one might generously call mischievous. He was pre-law and already applying at law schools. Law school, your mother said, and he just confided he was a prince. Wow! She looked at your dad. Did you hear that, Mark? A lawyer. Your parents and brother had come to the restaurant the weekend after Joey kissed you. The hostess seating them at the foretop in your section. You explained to Joey that you weren't sure if your parents would approve you going out with a college boy, so he volunteered to bring 2 glasses of Chianti to the table and introduce himself. An old-fashioned move meant to score points with your dad. There was small talk about Gonzaga, Joey. It was important to me and to my parents that I go to a Catholic school. And his career plans. I hope to do more with the law than just, make money. And finally, Joey gestured back to the kitchen. Well, I better get back to work. And he shook your dad's hand firmly. It was a pleasure meeting you. And then he bowed to your mother. I certainly see where your daughter gets her good looks. Those are some strong genes. And with that, he turned and he winked, knowing that you would hear. Genes. A lawyer, your mother said again after Joey had left. She looked at your dad and he raised a single eyebrow of approval. Later you would wonder at the way your parents had reacted. You almost felt presented to this college man, like maybe your dad had expected 2 cows and an acre of land. You would also wonder, did they know any lawyers? So apparent was it that they saw Joey as being in a higher class. Your father was an electrician, your mother was, a mother. Your older brother, Mike, wanted to be a motorcycle cop. That's what passed for ambition in your family. It was the first time you really thought about a career having anything to do with your station in life. Before, you always thought of careers as simple job descriptions, like figurines in an old play school town. This one's a fireman, this one's a teacher. It didn't occur to you that a certain profession might make you a more important person or a better human being. What made you want to be a lawyer? I asked Joey that night. He shrugged. My dad's a lawyer. His dad's a lawyer. Dad's dad's dad. My first ancestor probably practiced cave law. Joey's roommate Patrick was also pre-law and was also from the Bay Area. For California Catholics like them, in the 1980s, Gonzaga was a last-ditch safety school. Get a minor in profession or possession or flunk a class or two, and the parents might nix Santa Clara or San Francisco and don't even think about Stanford or Cal, and exile you to the cold, sleepy Spokane. There, the transplanted Californians whined about the lack of nightlife and trudged monastically through the snow, hoods up on their parkas. As Patrick used to say, I messed around and ended up here at fuck up state. It was shocking, the way Joey and Patrick talked about your hometown. And not that you thought Spokane, Washington was anything special, but back then you had nothing to compare it to. You'd never lived anywhere else, had never really been anywhere else. And so the way they treated it, the dismissal, the condescension, wow, that's a big word. And the mockery, these were a revelation to you. Spokane was indeed cold, and it was surely remote, and yes, its downtown was sleepy, but Joey and Patrick were anything but monastic. They ran around like Butch and Sundance, charming their way out of D's from professors and DUIs from cops. They got drunk almost every night, sometimes with the Jesuits. They made impromptu road trips to Canada to buy cases of Koniki and Labatt because those beers had higher alcohol content. They bought pot from the girlfriend of an English prof, and speed from a biker who lived down the street. They bought booze for your high school friends and let you invite them into parties, and they were hilarious, sexy. They had pet names for everything, a language all their own. They called Gonzaga Gonzo U, and they called each other Fitz, Patrick Fitzgerald, and Mac, Joseph McCune. They called you Jeans. They treated the city like a playground or a college rental with no respect for windows, walls, drapes, curbs, carpets, speed limits, property, daughters. To them, the word Spokane was a modifier that meant decadent fun. They didn't just get drunk, they got spo-drunk. Peed off the Monroe Street Bridge. Joey was spo-hungover the next day. He puked in the neighbor's flower bed. Patrick got spo-horny that night. He asked out the 25-year-old checker from Safeway, Harmony. And that's how you ended up one night late that summer in Harmony's brown Ford Pinto. Patrick in the passenger seat, you and Joey pressed into the small back seat on either side of Harmony's kid, Morton. Morton was maybe 2, a pacifier bobbing in and out of his mouth, no car seat to be seen. Morton, you asked his mom, is that a family name? It's a salt. Everyone was drinking Schlitz, the cans with a big blue bowl on them, because Patrick insisted malt liquor was classier than regular beer. You should call him Sportin', Joey said, like Morton from Spokane. I feel like that would limit his options. You drove around that night for a while, drinking beer and looking for something to do. Harmony asked what you did for a living. You didn't even consider telling her that you were still in high school. I work with Joey, you said. At Gino's? I love the salad there. What kind of dressing is that? Italian, I guess. Oh yeah, that makes sense, she said. What could fill the hours between 5 p.m. and sunset on a summer day? You drove here, drove there, chattered inanely. You went to a thrift store and Patrick bought a trench coat. You got burgers and milkshakes. Sportin sucked on French fries and everyone laughed. Someone suggested painting the graffitied railroad abutment, but you couldn't think of anything cool to paint. Sportin sucked on his binky until he fell asleep. You'd been going out with Joey for 3 weeks by this time, and this was your second double date with Harmony and Patrick. You were surprised that Patrick would date a grocery store checker, especially one with a kid. And that's when you heard something that bothered you. Patrick telling another friend of theirs, "I like the lowered expectation of townies." That night, with the sun going down, Harmony drove her Pinto along Upper River Drive and parked near Boulder Beach. Dates often ended up at the river that summer where you would wade and swim and fly from tire swings. That night someone, Patrick maybe, suggested skinny dipping. You were nervous, but you didn't object, knowing that a vote would go 3-1, Sportin abstaining as he slept against your side in the back seat. You were nervous because you and Joey had been progressing steadily that summer with each makeout session. Kissing. You did not kiss like a high school boy. And to fondling, those big meaty adult hands to, well, you know what's next. You and college boy were about to have sex. Crazy thing, love. Sometimes you just fall for a person, but sometimes you decide to love them. You set your reservations aside and you say, okay, this is the boy I'm going to love. This is the boy I'm going to lose my virginity to. This summer, right now, right here on this blanket next to this cold river. And when you decide that, well, he can do anything, say anything, and you would approve. He can say something like, you should call him Sportin. And you don't think, what an idiot. You think, that's hilarious. We should have sex. Crazy thing, love. In the back of Harmony's car, you turned once more and looked into Joey's wry cocktail olive eyes. Yes, you told yourself. And then he reached across the sleeping toddler and put a hand on your thigh. What do you say, Jeans? You think about that moment now, 30 years later, at home in Spokane to visit your ailing father, sitting in traffic on Division Street, after you've happened to glance over and see, painted on a bus bench, those same green eyes, settled in a bloated, balding face. Joseph J. McCune is now an attorney at law here in Spokane, a specialist in personal injury cases and DUIs, who apparently attracts his clientele through bus bench advertising. Coincidentally, or not, you also became a lawyer, graduating summa cum laude from Seattle University and in the top 10% of your law school class at the University of Washington. You should probably thank Joseph J. McCune for giving you the idea of becoming a lawyer, or thank your parents for reacting the way they did when Joey said those words, law and school. Because now you work in San Diego as a corporate lawyer, specializing in intellectual property rights. Most of your clients are tech companies. And while you feel a bit guilty condescending, you can't quite help it. You have come to think of lawyers like Joseph J. McCune as bottom feeders. Joey's singular contribution to jurisprudence being the idea that one should not immediately consent to a breathalyzer from police after one has crashed one's car into a Taco Bell. Call before you blow, his bus bench Mom, would you go? The light changed like 2 days ago. Coincidentally, Amber is at the very age, 17, that you were this summer you met Joey. And she is not happy about being back in sleepy Spokane, visiting her ancient grandfather who keeps staring at her septum ring like there's a ring in his granddaughter's septum. For the last year, you and your youngest have battled over nose rings, grades, curfews, and mostly over this hunk of idiocy named Kyle, who Amber calls my boo. Would you suggest that perhaps her boo might not raid the refrigerator every 20 minutes, or that her boo... Amber cries out in the endless song of her people. When are you going to start treating me like an adult? Mom, go! Horns are honking behind you. But you can't look away from this bus bench, from Joey's green eyes. Do you want to know when you become an adult, you finally ask your daughter? What? Amber is horrified the way she gets when you try to say something meaningful or actually whenever words of any kind come out of your mouth. What are you saying? Seriously, Mom, are you having a stroke? Finally, you look from the bus bench to your daughter and you say, you become an adult the first time you see through love. And then, with your daughter fuming and the light turning yellow, you drive away from Joey's green eyes forever. The four of you got out of the Pinto quietly, hoping not to wake little Morton. Doors latched gently. Harmony nodded and looked back, still asleep. And you carried blankets toward the shoreline, and you enjoyed hearing up slightly from Patrick and Harmony. You were shaking. It's cold out here, you said. We don't have to go in, Joey said. We can just lie down somewhere. I'll warm you up. You felt his hand on your waist. Even at dusk, you could sense those green eyes taking you in. You tried to muster courage. It's okay. You could do this. It's what adults did. They had sex. What, you were going to be a virgin forever? Stop shaking. It's Joey. Hilarious Joey. Who better to... And then, in your peripheral vision, something you couldn't quite put together. You turned back, and on the hill behind you, the Pinto is creeping forward, slowly, toward the river. The parking brake. How'd you set the parking brake? Your mind worked over the single detail as if you could go back in time and set it yourself. The car began moving faster, crunching over gravel. No, no, no! Harmony yelled. Then the car picked up speed and went over the bank, nose first, 3 feet over the bluff and down into the river. Didn't make much of a splash, but dipped like a soft ice cream cone in chocolate and then bobbed back up and tilted upward. For just a moment, you wondered if the car would float or maybe settle in shallow water. But then, the front of the car began sinking, moving forward like someone easing down a hill. The rest was a blur, as hard to completely remember as it is impossible to forget. A rush of adrenaline flashes, running, splashing, screaming. Of the four of you, it made sense you reached the car first. You'd grown up on that river, 4 years of swimming lessons at Cannon Pool, summer camp swims to Shark Island. You splashed over slippery rocks, current tugging at your clothes, Harmony screaming behind you, the car drifting, pointed down like a sinking ship, the hood going under, and the river water at the windshield by the time you got to the passenger window, which Harmony had left half open so she could hear if her baby cried. Martin was in the back seat. Harmony had locked the door. The water was above your waist. You could just get your arms through the window, but you couldn't reach him. Morton, come here! Your feet moved along the rocks with the car. River at your chest now. He was wide awake, chewing his pacifier as water swirled around his feet. He stared at you and all was lost until suddenly he crawled across the wet back seat and into your arms. Otherwise, can't think of otherwise, even now. You got his little head sideways through the open car window, scraping it on both sides, and only then did he start crying. The rest of his body slid through like a mocking version of birth itself. You held him against your chest, both of your heads out of the water as you walked back toward the shore. you would end up having 3 of your own. Jerome, Aaron, thankless Amber. But no child ever felt better against your body than that one. You moved slowly back toward shore, looking once more over your shoulder. The top of the car lurched forward, water rushing through that open window, and then it went under. Bubbles rising everywhere, the shape of the car on the surface of the water for just a moment, like dirt over a grave. Harmony had reached you by then. Oh my God, Morton! And even though she was shaking, you handed her child over. Patrick was at her side. Holy shit! Thank you! And only then did you look back to shore. It's not like you expected Joey to save the kid, but something about him, standing alone on the shore, clothes completely dry, told you everything you'd ever need to know.
Thank you so much, Julia. I was breathless, and I had a pretty good idea what was going to happen.
Anyone? Questions? Sue?
Oh, come on, you all have questions. Okay,
Sue has a question.
The first
Hi,
question's
Jess.
always
As serious as your stories often are, you almost always manage to put humor, lace humor throughout. And I'm wondering if you could talk about kind of why you do that and where humor fits in your writing.
Yeah, talk about where humor fits in the writing. I think it's less about making jokes than it is the way I see the world. I'm an accident-prone kid. I have broken, I think, all of the bones at this point. And something about being accident-prone makes you see the world in a pattern of accidents. And the puncturing of vanities, the humanity that rises out of humor, I'm just always drawn to it. And I love the way it connects with other things. So I love a story like this that starts out comic and nostalgic and moves towards something serious. So I think I'm often starting with humor and looking for a place where it intersects with some other emotion that maybe surprises in some way. But I always have to watch out that the story isn't only funny. Those are the ones that I tend to not include in my story collections. So, just show to my brother.
Shout it out,
Right
MJ.
here.
Did you give it from a woman's perspective or
Yeah.
a parent's perspective?
That's a good question. Was it from a woman's perspective or a parent's perspective? I worked at Gino's Fabulous Pizza as a dishwasher. I was a class below. But yeah, as a dad of daughters, I've thought a lot about those first experiences. And I have seen the look of every word that comes out of your mouth is idiocy. So, it's a tricky thing as a writer to write outside your gender, your ethnicity. I consider it a higher bar, I guess, but one that we have to attempt. As writers, we can't people a world only with people exactly like ourselves. As dynamic as a world of me's would be, it's not the world I want to read. And so, and I think there are certain universal things, the blindness of that first love, the fear of first sex, and then looking at your kids and realizing they're going to have to make the same mistakes you made, and there's almost nothing you can say. When I was sitting in traffic one day and looking over at the lawyers who advertise on bus benches, I don't know why I thought, what if you were the first person to date that and then the idea of calling Joe before you blow just made me so excited to get home and start typing.
One more question?
One more question. Yes.
So when you write, do you have an
I have a staff that does most of the writing. So, we have a big meeting every day. I'll say, that doesn't sound so good, you're fired. No, I don't usually have an idea of the ending. Certainly with this story, I didn't. Often though, 3 or 4 ideas will coalesce. And I grew up next to this river. Boulder Beach was a place we went. I had wanted to write about that. Gonzaga University now is this basketball dynasty.
Yeah.
People actually want to go to school. In the 80s, it was really where Catholics got exiled. So at an Italian restaurant right on campus, I'd always wanted to capture that milieu. Then I see a bus bench thing. It's like 4 ideas sort of coalesce. But I think one of the slight misconceptions about writing is that you are trying to get something across when you start. You're really exploring something, and if you know what it is, there's no reason to explore it. It's only going down a road that you don't really know that leads to this, and it's terrifying. Often you just think this is going nowhere, and sometimes it is. But not knowing the ending provided me. When I wrote that, I thought, oh my God, what if Morton's still in the car? Oh, what if it's rolling down the hill? What if you have that same sort of fear, could you get a kid out of the back of the canoe? How would that work? And, so I think it creates some of the same things that the reader then feels. It is terrifying. It's a leap of faith every time. But yeah, I generally like to not know where I'm going, which not just in writing, but in life. So yeah. Thank you so much, and thanks for coming.